Good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning. Over the last number of months, I've been here at Birmingham First for various things like congregational meetings and session meetings. So it's nice to be with you as a worship opportunity today. The gospel lesson for this morning comes to us from the 13th chapter of Matthew. And it's actually two sections out of that chapter. Beginning in the 13th chapter, we find Jesus starting to teach the people using parables. So this morning we have one of those parables before us. And after Jesus told the parable to the crowds that he was talking to, he told multiple parables, and then later in the day, he's with his disciples, and it becomes obvious that his disciples didn't understand the parables, and so Jesus begins to interpret the parables to them. So this morning we're going to be hearing the parable that he told, and then the interpretation, which comes a few verses later. Let us listen that we might hear God's word. That day Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea. Such a great crowd gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat there while the whole crowd stood on the beach. And he told them many things in parables, saying, "Listen, a sower went out to sow. And as he sowed, some seed fell on the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground where they did not have much soil, and they sprang up quickly. But since they had no depth of soil, and when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seed fell among the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seed fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen." And now we cut to where he's talking to the disciples who obviously their ears weren't clear that day. Jesus continues, "Hear then the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what is sown in the heart. This is what is sown on the path. As for what was sown on rocky ground, this is the one who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. Yet such a person has no root, but endures only for a while. And when trouble or persecution arise on account of the word, that person immediately falls away. As for that which was sown among the thorns, this is the one who hears the word, but the cares of the world and the lure of wealth choke the word and yields nothing. As for what is sown on good soil, this is the one who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yields in one case 100-fold, in another 60, and in another 30. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Jesus' introduction to this parable is short. A sower went out to sow. And I'm so conscious in our modern industrial computerized age, we don't know much about agriculture anymore. And I'm afraid people hear this as a seamstress went out to sow, S-E-W, a sower went out to sow. Not the case. This is about growing crops. And sowers generally took a large bag full of seed, which they draped over their shoulder, and as they went along in the fields, they grabbed handfuls and just threw it out onto the ground. So what do we make of a sower who throws seed everywhere, even in such unlikely, seemingly unproductive places as Jesus describes? Quite apart from best agricultural practices, what sort of worldview is suggested by someone who throws seeds on a well-worn path where the birds can eat them, on rocky ground where it is unlikely they will grow, or among thorns that will choke them out? We scratch our heads and we wonder at such a foolish waste of seed and other precious resources on the part of this sower. The logical place to sow seed, of course, is on good soil, and we readily take this message to heart. Even if we are not farmers or gardeners, the lesson here is easily applied in our situations. If you ever set about to plant a new church, plant it in a carefully scrutinized, sure-to-grow neighborhood. If you decide to develop a new missionary opportunity, choose one where the odds are good and the possibilities are promising. Be strategic about location. Like any self-respecting gas station, grocery store, or hamburger chain, be strategic and maximize your effort towards the arena of greatest result. Find the good soil and throw the seed on it. It's just good business. It seems obvious that the sower in this text is anything but a good business person. He seems willing to just fling that seed anywhere. Jesus tells the crowd that sowing the seeds of the kingdom results in abject failure 3 out of 4 times. Now, did you catch that statistic? 75% of the time, the work we do related to the divine reign will yield not a little, not something, but absolutely nothing, a big goose egg. Imagine that stat on a college recruitment postcard or an annual financial report. Come join us and fail. Often, repeatedly, spectacularly, totally. See your efforts result in nothing? Most of us are not able to settle for failure. Several years ago, there was an article in the New York Times titled, "Failure is on the Syllabus." Programs are being placed in colleges to help students used to achievement and recognition cope with setbacks. Prestigious schools such as Smith and Cornell, University of Texas, are helping failure-deprived students manage the fallout from their first experience with failure. One of the leaders of this program was quoted, "We're not talking about flunking out of pre-med or getting kicked out of college. We're talking about students showing up in residential life offices distraught and inconsolable when they score less than an A-." It's true, most of us really do not learn how to fail. That's what makes this that's what makes this parable so difficult. Jesus bluntly says failure is going to happen. Just expect it. Jesus does not say add fertilizer. He does not say we should analyze the soil in which to cast seeds. He simply tells us the world is full of soil that is inhospitable, even hostile to the seeds of God's word. More often than not, 3/4 of the time, let me remind you, the world will reject the rule of God. Keep this in mind as you go about your planting so as not to be discouraged or to lose focus. Don't worry about the soil, Jesus says. Further, there's no need to worry about the seed either. Scarcity doesn't appear to be an issue given that the sower throws it around with abandon. There's no suggestion that the lack of growth is due to faulty seed. No careful planning need be required. Being anxious about what to plant, how to plant, where to plant, that's all unnecessary. The sower is not so cautious and strategic as to throw the seed in only those places where the chances of growth are best. No, this sower is a high-risk sower, relentless indiscriminately throwing seed on all the soil, as if it all were potentially good soil. On the rocks, amid the thorns, on the well-worn path, maybe even the bombed-out terrain of warfare, which leaves us to wonder if there is any place or circumstance in which God's seed cannot sprout and take root. It seems that we can throw seed just anywhere, suggesting that anywhere is, in the final analysis, the arena of God's care and redemptive activity. The sower throws seed not only on good soil, but also amid the rocky, barren, broken places to remind us that God's vision for the world is itself often apprehended in strange and broken places. We're to emulate this sower. Our focus should be on the throwing of the seed, the sharing of the word, the preaching, the teaching, the doing of the gospel. The results of our sowing are not our concern. Our success or our failure is not ours at all. This kingdom work has nothing to do with achievement and everything to do with passionate participation. Imagine that message to a world obsessed with measurable results, relentless resume building, and college students who believe their worth is tied up in their grades or their awards. Why does Jesus tell this parable to the swelling crowds and to his newbie disciples? In Matthew's gospel, this is the third teaching discourse which Jesus has presented to them. And Jesus knows that the road ahead will get increasingly more harrowing. Following Jesus offers countless opportunities to learn from failure. Getting a B is the least of anyone's worries the nearer they get to the cross. Jesus has already warned the disciples of coming persecutions. And in the very next chapter of Matthew, John the Baptist is beheaded. God's present and coming kingdom will not come without great resistance, and we can't accuse Jesus of covering up that truth. Failure is certain. Followers' best efforts won't often bear any fruit. Keep planting anyway. Keep throwing seed around like Oprah gives away cars. Don't be surprised when the yield is nothing. Rejoice when you are surprised by the harvest that is 100 times the norm. Then keep going and keep throwing that seed. Resistance to God's reign of justice, mercy, and grace is real, strong, and inevitable. But ultimately, God's victory is certain. Isaiah told us that God says his word goes forth from his mouth and will come back to God, having accomplished its tasks. There will be bursts of amazing, life-giving, abundant growth in our process, but practically, our focus is not on the soil or the seed, but on gregarious, abundant, foolish-looking daily sowing. The story does not end with inhospitable soils. It does not end with the unrelenting sower. This story ends with a harvest. In the ancient world, sevenfold meant a good year for a farmer. Tenfold meant true abundance in the crop. 30-fold would feed a village for a year. But 100-fold? Well, 100-fold harvest would let the farmer retire to a villa by the Sea of Galilee. You see, my friends, this parable ends with a miracle, 100-fold harvest. It is our job to trust that possibility. So much of our sowing appears unproductive, a complete failure. Jesus goes beyond simply encouraging his listeners to keep on keeping on in the face of rejection and failure. Instead, he challenges them and us to believe in God's abundance. So let's get to failing spectacularly for Jesus. It will be hard and disappointing, and as one biblical commentator put it, often unrewarding. But sometimes the kingdom will come on earth as in heaven, and we will have the unspeakable joy of being part of it when it does. Thanks be to God.